Hello friends, I welcome you all, your host Rajiv, to my channel Electricity Market in India, and we are finally present today with the presentation on carriage and content separation, also known as wire and supply segregation. And I have taken this presentation as a future power market presentation segment because this thing is currently not in practice in India. It is proposed in the Electricity Amendment Bill, which could be a reality in another 1 or 2 years. And stay tuned to this presentation. This is a very interesting presentation, what we will see today. And this is going to be the future of Indian power market. It took a lot of effort from myself and my team to prepare this presentation, and we all hope that you all will like this and put your suggestions as well as any query on the comment box. We will try to answer it. And those who are new, I would request you all to kindly subscribe to the channel Electricity Market and press the bell icon. You will get to know whenever a new presentation is updated. You will get the email at your inbox. Also, those who are new and who are seeking certification for any power market course, they can see the comment box, follow the link, and you can do the course given there. One more input which I have received over the last few weeks is that many people have called me and asked me to put presentation in language Hindi. So I'm working on few presentations to put up in Hindi language so that mass population of our country can understand the presentations and can take benefit out of it. So stay tuned to this channel and let's see what lies ahead on carriage and content separation. So it's a very big topic, carriage and content separation, and it's presented in currently the status of the Electricity Amendment Bill is that it has been presented in the Parliament and it is yet not passed on the central as well as on the state level. Since electricity is a concurrent subject, any kind of acts or amendments needs to be equally accepted by both central as well as state government for its full implementation. But still, I have just covered the major portion of the Electricity Amendment Bill, which covers the wire and supply segregation. And today's video presentation will have the following topics. First, we will see what is the present competition in the Indian power sector. Then we'll see what is the role of DISCOM, what is the current structure, what are the various issues in current structure and open access, what is the proposed industry structure as per wire and supply segregation, what are the key changes proposed in the structure, what are the various gaps in the act, and how the revised consumer application process will be once this structure is in place, and what are the benefits of wire and supply segregation. So stay tuned to the PPT. We will cover each topics one by one. So as you see in this slide, uh, we have presented a kind of timeline for the competition in the Indian power sector. As we see that the Electricity Act came in the year 2003, where the first time there was a mention of purchasing power through competitive bidding process, which is covered under the section 63 of the Electricity Act. Also, a new concept of parallel distribution licenses was introduced, and open access was also introduced in the Electricity Act. So it was like a fresh leaf of fresh oxygen for the Indian power sector, the Electricity Act 2003. Lot of new uh, concepts were first introduced in the Act. Power trading mechanism was first introduced, as also there was mention of putting a power exchange, which finally came in the year 2008. Also in 2005, as we see, there was a Ministry of Power guidelines for procurement of power. There it gave a very clear methodology how to procure power under competitive model under section 63 through competitive bidding process. In the year 2006, we saw that MOP also came up with a competitive bidding guidelines for transmission. So earlier transmission was more or less a monopolistic business, But in 2006, the competitive bidding mechanism was also introduced for setting up of transmission projects. In 2008, we saw that the first power exchange was set up in India, which was Indian Energy Exchange, and then Power Exchange of India Limited also came in, so which brought in lots of competitiveness in the short-term market, where earlier it was only the short-term bilateral contracts which was in place, but then you also saw the short-term power exchange contracts in place. So that brought in lots of competition in the short-term market. And finally, in 2014, we saw with the new government in place, the Electricity Amendment Bill, and which first time spoke about segregation of distribution and supply business. We are in 2019 now. It's been 5 years from there, from 2014, but still the Amendment Act is not in place. And why it is not in place and what are the issues we'll cover in the coming up slides. But definitely the timeline suggests that competition is in Indian power market, and we have seen the competition in power procurement. We are now seeing the competition in putting up transmission projects, and now we will see how the competition is going to be a game changer in the supply as well as the distribution business. So now we'll see how the DISCOM is working today in today's various states and in cities. The major work of any DISCOM managing director is currently twofold. One is he has to see how to procure power for his state or city, and the second is he has to see how to distribute this power to its customers, which is basically the residential, industrial, commercial, agriculture, and the railways, which makes the pack of his customer segment. One more thing which he has to oversee is that the billing takes place in time, meter reading takes place in time, and finally the money should come from the customers as a part of the recovery process. Now, this distribution segment is the most critical link in the whole power supply chain, and it is tightly regulated also through Electricity Act 2003, National Electricity Policy 2005, National Tariff Policy 2006. The distribution company or DISCOMs in the power sector uh, also have a universal supply obligation, that they are bound to supply power to these segments which I mentioned. Unless they do, they have to face penalty, and this is given in Electricity Act 2003. There is a concept of parallel licensing also in some states, but we'll cover it in the next slide. Now, while the reforms in this segment should have preceded generation and transmission, but in India it is other way around. We have seen a lot of reforms which has taken place in the generation segment and the transmission segment, and distribution has been the most left out segment in the whole supply chain model. However, over the last few years, we have seen some attempts made by the government with various schemes such as the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana and Accelerated Power Development and Reform Program, but it has little or no major impact. Uh, why? Because distribution is in this whole supply chain. Distribution segment is the only segment which is uh, uh, heavily monitored by the political section in India. Reason being, the end customers here, the residential or industrial or commercial, are the major uh, segment which the politicians target, and these are the vote banks for any political party in India. So any change of tariff, any new tariff order has its political impact, and which is more serious than the uh, impact on the overall health of this segment, which is distribution. Also, there has been huge AT&C losses there has been theft of power. There is losses because of not good maintenance of the wire segment, and plus there is under recovery from the customer's side. So adding all these three things, we see that the distribution is the most ailing segment, and they are unable to pay to the generating companies and the transmission companies, resulting in mounting of losses for these generating companies also, transmission companies also, and in a way it is impacting the employees and the other stakeholders involved in the distribution business. So overall, this is the most important segment, and now the Electricity Amendment Bill wants to rectify this whole process by segregating the supply side, where this supply will be taken care of by the supply companies, and distribution will be only looked after by the distribution licensing companies. How the new segment will look, we will cover it in the next slide. This is the current structure of the distribution model in any state or any city. As you can see, there is a generating companies where for representation purpose you can see one thermal power plant and one wind power plant who are supplying real electricity to the state discoms or city discoms through the transmission company. Now it could be STU if the generating plants are inside the state and the discom is also inside the state, and it will be CTU if the generating plant is in some other state and it is supplying power to some discom inside the state. And finally, this discom is supplying this power to the end consumer, consumer 1, consumer 2, and consumer 3, and billing them at the end of the month and getting the money back from them, and then passing that money to the transmission company, which could be the STU or SCTU, and part of the money to the generator 1, generator 2, with which they have signed the power purchase agreement, which is called PPA. Now there is one more concept where these consumer, which is the industrial and the commercial, can actually take power through the open access route, where they will sign a PPA directly between an open access open access generator, and this power will be supplied through the grid of through the transmission company and through the discom, and finally it will go to the commercial and industrial customer. However, this structure is not this structure is not very successful in India. Why? Because why open access is not a success, we'll cover in the next slide. But this is how the present discom structure works in any state in India, where you have multiple generators, a single transmission company, a single discom, and multiple consumers. Only in the city of Mumbai you have parallel licensing concept, where you have duplicate network, one by Tata Power and another by Reliance Power. But mostly 99% in most of the states and cities in India, you have only one discom on which you have to rely. So this is the current structure, and now we will see what are the issues in the current structure. So what are the issues in current structure, which I showed in the last slide, and open access? First is high level of cross subsidy in most of the states. Now you understand why open access is not a hit, is because you need to take permission from the same discom who is currently supplying you power and billing you for the power, and you are going to take the permission from him only, that let me take power from some other source and I don't want to take power from you. So in any way you are a cream customer of the discom, and why he will allow you? Because of the act, most of the state allows open access, but they levy very high cross subsidy surcharge, which makes the commercial and industrial customer category not able to go to the open access route unless they put up their captive or group captive project, which is not a very feasible activity. As you have seen my earlier presentation on captive and group captive project, they are very cost inclusive, and it may not give viability for small industries to put up their own captive projects. So cross subsidy surcharge is a component which these discoms put in the power bill of the industry and commercial category, which prevents them from going for open access in most of the states. Now it is an entry barrier for any supply company also, because the cross subsidies would have to be negated by tariff hikes, universal charge model, or direct government subsidy, and by putting this under the wheeling charge segment, this can be resolved. How it can be resolved, we will see in the coming slides. One more issue which you see in the current structure is that what the discoms will feel if I'm going away from their network. So the repercussions of moving away from the discoms. Many industry feels that the moment I go out of from the network of the discom and I arrange my own supply, the discom people may not support me technically. They may not come for any technical support. They will not give me the standby power in case of emergency, and they may deny a service to me if I am an industrialist or a commercial owner. So this is one more reason of the current structure which prevents people or industries to going for open access. The third reason is lack of information and access to small consumers. The consumers, especially the smaller commercial or industrial users, are often at a loss, like in the process of open access, along with specifics such as which power trader company is good, which generator is good, whom to approach, what will be the process. So this is another entry barrier for which is another barrier for these customers to go for open access out of this present structure. The fourth is lack of incentive for the generators. Now the generators lack incentive to provide electricity to smaller industrial or commercial consumers through open access, as it forces them to deal with multiple buyers on individual basis and reduce their financial security over a longer period of time. Further, through the electricity exchanges, buyer can enter into only short-term contracts, which leads to uncertainty of future electricity prices for the consumers. So generators also don't feel there is any incentive of going for small PPAs with these industries. We will see how this thing will be improved once the wire and supply segregation takes place, where the generator don't have to sign up PPAs with individual consumers. They only need to sign it with the supply licensees, which will act as a bulk supplier model. Also, one more reason is that in the present structure there is inappropriate estimation of the loss levels. So the amount of technical losses levels are loaded, or all the losses are loaded on open access consumers, are based on estimates of the discoms and commissions. These are not done at a very practical manner, which it should have been. One more reason for which is there in the present structure is the lack of infrastructure, which is there is inadequate transmission and distribution infrastructure, which leads to congestion in the network. And also there is non-availability of 24 into powers 24/7 power supply. Now in a power deficit scenario, the price of electricity generated are pushed up, which in turn erodes the savings of the power purchase cost that are envisaged through open access. Once the power is available in the market, the discoms finds it difficult to purchase that power due to their own poor financial health, and they resort to load shedding, which is again not a very healthy thing to do in our, but which is very much present in our current structure. So adding all these issues are the present issues which we see in the present current structure for the retail consumers as well as the open access consumers. We will see how it has been covered through the wire and supply segregation model. Now the most important slide, where we will see how the proposed wire and supply segregation structure will look like. So you can now see this slide where I have tried to put up all the components. So let's go from the left side to the right side. So the generators will still remain as how they used to supply power to the state to the transmission network. There will be a new component, new company which will be called intermediary company. The major role of the intermediary company would be the procurement of power as per the existing PPAs of the discom. Uh, there there will be multiple roles of this intermediary company. They have to do the demand aggregation from all the retail suppliers level, and they have to basically, these intermediary company are going to sign the power supply agreements with these retail suppliers. They also will allocate the existing PPAs amongst the retail supply licensees and the incumbent licensee. They will also manage the existing cross subsidies, and they will handle this intermediary company will handle the regulatory assets, which will have which will also recognize the accumulated financial loss till date. So this will be the function of the intermediary company. Now the retail supply licensees, as you see, RSL1, RSL2. So earlier in the earlier structure, the DISCOM we used to manage the power procurement as well as power supply. But now, for the first few years, the DISCOM will be the incumbent supply licensee, which will have the responsibility to supply power to the non-contestable consumer category, which is, you can see, consumer 1. However, the new retail supply licenses will come up, which will have the major responsibility of this RSLs would be to do the demand forecasting and making the business plans, efficient power procurement through intermediary company, or after certain years they will have their own PPAs in place, trade power with other suppliers to see if there is any shortfall or excess power than the requirement. If there is some shortfall, they will have to manage the shortfall through purchase from the open market or through signing of PPA with the some more PPAs with intermediary company. If there is some excess power, then this retail suppliers may sell that excess power in the open market, in the on power exchange or on any other medium. Some other responsibility of these resale supply companies would be to generate bills and generate distribution, revenue collection from customers, customer care service, uh, credit contracts, fulfilling regulatory obligations, and etc. So these all will be the responsibility of the retail supply company. There will be the consumer interface actually, and the consumers will be directly selecting these retail suppliers from their web portal or through applications, through mobile apps, or just how we select our mobile connections these days. This is exactly how it will be for selecting our retail power supplier. One some other responsibilities which may get added in to these retail suppliers would be to make to see how the commercial losses can be reduced in the overall supply chain which is there today. Now this still now we have seen now that there will be generator who will be supplying power through in the state, and they will be signing the PPAs with the intermediary companies. These intermediary companies will sign new PPAs and will take over the existing PPAs from the existing DISCOMs, and they will further supply power supply agreements with the incumbent supply licensee, which will be the DISCOM, and the new retail supply licenses which will come up over the years, and they will have the responsibility of supplying power according to those PPAs to them. And from retail suppliers would be the interface between the customer, and they will do the power supply, billing, recovery of the dues, making sure the commercial losses are not there, etc. Now there is one more, this goes from the supply side. Now we will see how the distribution of power will take place in from the wire side. So there will be a distribution licensee, which could be the existing distribution company which is there in the cities or state, and their major work will be divided into four parts. First will be your DNO, which is distribution network operations. Second is DPO, which is distribution planning operation. Third is distribution system operation, and the fourth is distribution market operations. Now under DNO, which is distribution network operation, the major work would be to maintain to maintain neutral access to the network, expansion and strengthening of the network, operation and maintenance of the network, such as network reinforcement and replacement, of any network line which has gone for shutdown or which needs repair. Operation and maintenance of the network, maintaining 24/7 network availability, reduction in technical losses, since now the network would be owned by the distribution business, and they have to maintain that there is no power theft or any kind of issues with the network. Then coordination with the retail supplier companies, these companies for any new connection release in the license area. Then coordination with the then fault restoration. If there is any fault, then these distribution licensees have to make sure that the fault is rectified within a due time, and then fulfilling the regulatory obligations for the distribution tariff and tariff determination and efficiency targets. Now, the DPO, which is the distribution planning operation, its role would be to coordinate with the transmission utility for network planning. The distribution system operation, DSOs, its role would be to monitor the distribution network operation, supervision and control, real-time operation for distribution network control and dispatch, and ensure integral operation with other entities for maximum operation efficiency. The distribution market operation, DMO's role would be doing the energy accounting, energy scheduling, dispatch of retail supply, balancing and settlement, and distribution loss calculation. So all in all, these all four segments would be taken care by the distribution licensee who is operating in the segment. Also, there would be one metering agency. The meters won't be like today's meter. Most of the states and cities will convert their meters into smart meters, and this metering agency work can also be taken care of by the RSL, which could be retail supply, or it can be given to the distribution licensees. Now there is one more concept that for few years the tariff, there is one category of customers which will be non-contestable, to which the incumbent supply licensee ISL which will supply the power, and their tariff would be the tariff as defined by the SCRC. Also, for other category of consumers, there would be a capping of tariff which would be defined by SCRC. There is one more concept of open access which will be still there, and what I feel is that this open access supplier will be a kind of retail supplier only, and who will coordinate with the either intermediary company or with one of the retail supplier or directly with the consumer, and its billing and other things will be taken care of by the distribution licensee, like in current business. So this is how the total structure will look like. This generation, transmission, PPA signing, commercial signing of power will be taken care by this side. Actual physical flow of power to customers will be taken care by the distribution licensee, and meters would be smart meters, and we will see the actual concept of smart grid in place. So I hope you understand this slide and how this structure will look like once the wire and supply segregation takes place. Now, to summarize, what are the key changes proposed in the Amendment Act is segregation of wires and supply business, formation of an intermediary company between distribution license lines and the end consumers, railways and metro rail to become deemed licensees, that is they can procure power on their own, they don't have to depend on a discom for their own power procurement. Then the prominent consumer choice, multiple supply licensees in the supply area will come up. There will be a ceiling tariff which will be determined by the commission, which would be a CRC. Direct transfer of subsidy to the low end consumers, like in current tariff model we see that there are various different tariff structure for residential, commercial and industrial category, but in this supply licensee it won't be like that. It will be a simple flat tariff for all the categories, and if there is any subsidy, then it will be directly passed on to certain categories in their bank accounts. So that will help in making understanding the overall power purchase cost and power supply cost in the state. Also, there will be penalty for renewable purchase obligation non-compliance, elimination of surcharge and cross subsidies over the time. So what could be the maximum surcharge and cross subsidy would be the wheeling charge which is present today, and slowly and steadily this cross subsidy will go away, and it will be equal playing field between all the categories of customer. Also, there won't be any requirement of license to supply electricity by renewable energy generator in any area, and by any generator in rural area, like any thermal power plant can supply power in rural areas without any license, and by charging stations for electric vehicles. Now we will see what are the gaps still present in this act. So one of the major gap is the roles, responsibilities and functions of the intermediary company is not clearly defined. It will be done by central government, but it is still not defined. Then applicability of section 131A related to the transfer scheme to the private distribution companies is not well documented. How the transfer of the PPAs, how the transfer of the existing losses, how the transfer of the recoveries and dues would be done, it's not clearly given. Also, the timeline for the implementation of the transfer scheme of segregation is not defined. Then segregation between the supply licensee and distribution licensee is still vague, it's not very clear. There is no mention of standards of performance, how it has to be done. Then treatment of the existing power purchase agreements and power procurements of the future is not well documented. Then responsibility of providing connection to consumers, it's also not given. It will be either of distribution licensee or it will be of retail supply licensee, it's not clear. Now responsibility of metering and loss in the distribution network is also not given. Then treatment of unrecovered historical costs and losses, who will bear that, it's not given. Now clarity on universal supply obligation and power connection sanctioning licensee is not given. Designing principle for ceiling tariff is not shown, and recommendation on consumer categories, it's also not given. Some more gaps in the act is responsibilities of meter management, loss audit, energy accounting, who will maintain the transactional web page platform, principles of allocation of losses and billing responsibility, etc. Now it's also not defined who is contestable and non-contestable consumer and categories, direct subsidy mechanism and responsibilities, how it will be done, transition mechanism and the possible need for incumbent supply company, defining areas of supply licensees, it could be state-wise or revenue district-wise, what are the mechanism to deal with areas of supply by existing private operators, and mechanism for business continuity for operating franchisee companies. So these are the gaps which needs to be answered and fulfilled if you see a robust wire and supply segregation structure in place. This is a diagrammatic representation of how revised consumer application process will look like once this new structure would be in place. So as you will see, the consumer who needs a connection will first submit application for a new connection to the distribution licensee. He will fill the format, he will supply and he will submit the documents to the distribution licensee, and once he submits the application, he will also choose the supplier out of 2, 3, 4 or whatever be the number of the supply licensee in the area or the district where he is residing. He will choose the supplier based on maybe through multiple platforms which will be available through web portals or mobile apps, just like we have today. We can choose any of our mobile connection supplier through the websites or through the mobile applications. It will be similar to that. Now once he has submitted the application, the distribution licensee will ensure the readiness of the network and meter installation as per the guidelines of State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So the meters would be installed. The metering agency will ensure the supervision of installation of the meters by the distribution licensee, and in the case of new connection, and onward metering management process for the said consumer. So this is how the thing will take place. So the distribution licensee will take care of the meters and the distribution part, and supplier company will take care the supply of the power whom the customer has chosen. Now, what would be the benefits of wire and supply segregation? The benefits have been divided into four parts. What would the benefit for the distribution licensee would be? A cleaner balance sheet with all the existing assets. They will start again from zero. They will get a reasonable rate of return on their investments without any risk of power procurement cost. So their focus will now only be on strengthening of the distribution network and the proper upkeep of the system. They will be responsible only for monitoring and extending the network. Now for supply licensees, they will have very low investment requirement for business. Technically, these supply licensees could be the power trading companies which are existing today. However, they are generally on a national level, but once this thing is in place, we will see multiple supply licenses coming up in various states and districts in India. So they will have very low investment requirement for the business. They will have minimum regulatory compliances. The regulatory asset charges under supply licensee would be controlled. They will have possibility of access to competitive power through stressed assets. New supply licenses could be provided on an annual basis. So on every year, new licenses would be add on. Now, what would be the advantage for consumers? The low-end and non-contestable consumers will get the benefit of cheapest power in the state with a direct transfer of subsidy to their bank accounts. The contestable consumers will have a choice of supply licensee and have access to competitive tariff. The separate metering and support management company is expected to result in the reduction of AT&C losses. So overall, the electricity bill of the consumer will go down, which will be the USP of this wire and supply segregation structure. Now, what would be the positive points for generators? Now they will now have control on the recovery of fixed and variable cost. The chances of allocation of competitive power from the stress assets will increase because currently the power plants which are unable to sell the power will get an opportunity to sell their power at certain districts or certain cities or certain areas where their power would be competitive and would be accepted. Also, there will be a possibility of tie-up of untied power, which I have just mentioned as a part of the stressed assets. So overall, this whole structure will be beneficial for the consumers, and it will be a win-win situation for the discoms, distribution licensees, as well as the supply licensees. There would be lot of improvement which can be seen on the ownership part, because now the specific ownership would be given to the distribution licensees and supply licensees as well as the generators. So each of them will take care of their own responsibilities, and in the end it will be the customers who will be the most beneficial category amongst all, who is currently suffering because of the inefficiency or um, uh, because of the inefficiency of the whole system. The customer is finally suffering by paying high electricity bill today, and also not getting the quality power which he is supposed to get by paying such a high tariff. So friends, I hope you liked my presentation today. It's been quite lengthy presentation, but the topic is very interesting, and it can be debated on various platforms, and it can be extended. It should be a 1 hour or 2 hours kind of presentation, but because of the paucity of time, I have restricted this to set few slides to give a flavor of how this whole structure will look like. So in case you have any doubt, you can contact me offline. You can give your comments in the comment box, and I will be happy to answer your queries. You can reach me out on the phone numbers, and this is my email ID. So stay tuned. If you like the presentation, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. Share it with your friends, share it with education institutes, and I will be happy to answer your queries. Thank you. Jai Hind.